gearing system. So this one's packed. Okay, this actually seems like a great interview. Okay, cool. All right, let's get into this one. Ian, what do you got for us?
Hey guys, the Ian interview is going to start in a second. Just wanted to let you know that there have been some audio hiccups that Marcelian right there is just working on fixing them up for you. It's not a big deal, but you might notice them throughout the video. We do our best to fix them for you. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, finally it happened. We have Ian Hazzikostas here, game director for WoW. I think everybody knows Ian at this point. We have some good, crazy questions for Ian. Hopefully we get through all of them on time. Hi Ian.
Hi.
Always a pleasure.
Pleasure to be here with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, the War Within is upon us. It's kind of a crazy time, so we'll just get right into it, not waste any time whatsoever.
Sounds great.
Kick it off.
I was going to start with one of the biggest systems that you guys did with warbands, which have been incredible. And I know it's most likely an ongoing project, and you probably have a lot of plans, maybe some plans you can talk and not talk about, but I was really curious, something a little bit akin to the kind of content that we do. And when it comes to currencies like the crest and stuff, and I know that you guys introduced some discounts for alts when it comes to alts, we end up a lot of the time with our mains done with all the content, all the upgrades, with a lot of crests that we cannot do, and we're thinking if there's any plans to use warbands or that similar system to give currency even with tax to alts and stuff like that.
That's an interesting idea. I think, no specific plan along those lines right now, but I think that's the sort of thing that warbands creates the potential for. Really, like warbands is not just a single point in time. It's a foundation for the future of World of Warcraft. I think it's, as we approach our 20th anniversary, it's replacing the old framework that was so tied to individual characters and everything was on a character level. And that's why, for years, when we would get feedback about things that weren't alt-friendly enough, asking for more things to be account-wide, it was very challenging technically because the system was never built with that in mind. Warbands are really rebuilding all of that to create a new foundation. And so what you've seen, initially, this is just the beginning.
It's looking great already.
Looking great already. If it's just the beginning, then we should expect greater things.
Chat, what percentage of players do you guys suspect have more than one tune? Because back in the day, it was like pretty much everyone just played one main. But I feel like it's got to be almost 100% of people have more than one player. Not everyone, but it's got to be like pretty darn close. Like it's got to be like 95 or like 90 or something. I actually only have one tune, but usually, in past expansions, I have like 3 or 4 mages or something. So yeah, I think whenever you make a decision, you have to think about the pros if you go forward with the decision and the cons and how many people it's going to help and how many people it's going to hurt if you go forward with a specific decision. And in this case, if it's really like 95% of people have alts, I would say like 95% of people really appreciate this. And the downside is pretty much nothing. Because like someone like me, if I only have like one character, there's no downside. So this is just like all upside with like, maybe you could make the argument the downside is something like you lose that core class identity because instead of just playing your one main, it's easier to fodem reroll or something. But like that's kind of a weak argument probably. It's pretty much just like all upside for like 95% of people. And then it is a very, very small downside argument to be made. So like, yeah, it's just a massive win.
Now, there's a stigma around the community, like when it comes to like tuning for classes, right? Now, I know kind of a spicy subject, but we'll see, how it flows. So there's this thing like when you think about race to world first, NDI competitions, all of that. How much is the team taking into account those specific game styles when it comes to balance? Because there's always this about this 1% situation, right? So
So I think, you initially framed it in terms of class tuning. I think there's 2 different aspects of it. There's class tuning and there's content tuning. Content tuning, I think, really, for the most part, isn't taking into account or focused on that very cutting edge, the very, very top players. We're designing Mythic Plus dungeons and we're balancing them for the hundreds of thousands of people who do Mythic Plus dungeons. And then there's this open-ended progression system that will let the very best, prove themselves at the top. For raiding, I will say that during the first week or two on Mythic, we do tune the very last couple of bosses in the raid with the world first guilds in mind, because they're the only guilds in the world that are going to be seeing those bosses at that time. It doesn't matter that Farak is nearly impossible for most cutting-edge guilds, because those cutting-edge guilds are still working on, boss 3, boss 4. Sure. By the time they get to Farak will be easier. And so we wouldn't really be doing anyone a service if we tuned Farak for cutting-edge guilds when, Liquid and Echo and Method are getting there. Now,
that's interesting. I mean, this is probably like an obvious statement for a lot of you guys, but so when Liquid, Echo, Method, he said, are killing a boss, it's often mythic. It's like pre-nerf mythic. And every other guild that ends up killing it on mythic is fighting a nerfed, tuned down, easier version of that mythic boss. So like that first week or two kill is even like more impressive, because it's like pre-nerf mythic that no one else even really gets to see, right? I haven't really looked at it from that perspective before in terms of race to world first. I always thought about it as just clearing the mythic quickly and clearing the mythic first and clearing the mythic under geared, because you don't have the mythic gear yet because you have only cleared once, or not even once. So I thought it was like quick, under geared, and first, but I didn't really consider that it's also harder. On top of all the other factors, it's also just a harder encounter because it hasn't been nerfed yet. It's crazy.
Now, when it comes to class tuning, I think the community, we are listening to lots of community feedback, and it's kind of a back and forth discourse with the community. Yep. The community looks to, Sims, and they look to like 95th plus percentile parses for what classes are capable of. No one is looking at the 50th percentile, right? True. And so like it doesn't, if a class, maybe a spec is performing better for the average player but falls behind for top performers, everyone is going to view that spec and tell us that spec needs buffs, that spec is underpowered. And so, of course, we have to pay attention to it. I mean, for the overwhelming majority of players, like even the very best in the world, there is more that could be done with better choices, better execution, more skill, right? And so for the average player, playing the spec that you know well, that you feel comfortable playing, where you really understand the rotation, you can do it without thinking about it too much, is going to yield better results than switching to the build that you read is supposed to be the best, but you don't know it well enough to execute it that way.
That is so true. I come at it from the PvP side of things, but people will always be like, well, what's the best spec? And like, so say for mage, it might be fire, right? Or whatever. It's just a theoretical, but say it's fire at a super high end BlizzCon AWC top end level, but they're like 1700 rated and they're just getting into PvP. They've never played fire. It's like, oh, well, in that bracket with that knowledge and with that kind of experience, maybe you've never played fire. Like, you'll probably just do like way better as Frost for, theoretically. Frost with like a Warlock at 1900 is going to just be way better than, say, like Fire RMP. If you've never played Fire, you don't know the strats, like, you know what I mean? And then by the time you learn it, it might get nerfed and then Frost might be better anyway. So people like follow these trends, and they might be doing worse because they're following the trends of like the very, 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 very top. I'm trying to think of it like an analogy in like, I heard an analogy. I think this is from Dr. Mike Israeli. It was something about bodybuilders, because he's fitness, like sports PhD, fitness scientist or whatever. His analogy was something like this: if you want to get from your house to work the quickest way possible, it might be like getting into a rocket and like taking the rocket to work. But on a practical level, that like wouldn't make sense for like 99% of people, or like 99.9999999. Like that would, like, you just would never actually do that. But it technically would be quicker than driving if you like preloaded the rocket and you just got there instantly. But that's not something like most people would actually ever want to do. And it's kind of like that when people that are like playing the game are looking at these like top strats and like specs. It's like, well, okay, well, yeah, technically that's the best, but like that's probably like you actually probably shouldn't do that. And the Dr. Mike Israeli example was with bodybuilders eating like only chicken and rice and broccoli, and he's like, yeah, that's what like a top end bodybuilder would do, you know, especially if there's other influences there too. But like that's probably not for most people, right? That's like pretty much like not the best way for like almost everybody else. And that was his example, which I thought was a good one. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
So that said, though, yes, I mean, I think we have to look at the same data that the community is looking at. Otherwise, there would be a disconnect, and the community would just think that we're bad at balancing the game because we need to use the same definitions of what balance means.
True. And it was felt, I mean, through what we've seen as well, the balance between classes has been getting tremendously better with every patch, everything, and the amount of work that you guys have put in is like very, like the amount of passionals that we're getting is unprecedented.
I appreciate that. I mean, the reality is there's always going to be a spec that's at the bottom of that list. Doesn't matter if it's 8%, 5%, 3%, someone will be at the bottom. There'll be someone at the top. And, you know, the other factor in this is like perceptions of the meta actually drive the meta to some extent. I mean, one of my favorite personal anecdotes that taught me some valuable lessons about balance. When I was a class designer, like 13, 14 years ago at this point, I was working on Death Knight as one of the classes.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember, you have me to blame for blood tanking in its original formation, active mitigation, and anyway. I forget which way it was, but I'm pretty sure their general perception was, between the DPS specs at the time during Kata, I think it was like Unholy Death Knights were telling us that they were terrible and everyone was playing Frost. And Frost was indeed doing better than Unholy at that time. So then we buff Unholy by 5% or so. We don't touch Frost at all. And the community, you know, thinks about this and they're like, okay, Unholy's better now. Sure. Fast forward, 3 weeks, we're looking at logs, we're looking at data. Frost dropped by several percent. We didn't touch Frost, but what happened was the best players, the ones who min-maxed the most, switched specs.
True. Yeah.
And so the performance, if you looked at the damage graph over time, it would look like we nerfed the spec. Yeah. We didn't nerf the spec. What happened was the best players decided to play a different spec. And so in that sense, it's a moving target. There's no way we're ever going to get it perfect. Oh, yeah. But what we try to do is hopefully be reactive and frequent enough in our balance changes that we can reassure players that if it seems like you're on the bottom today, don't worry, you're not going to stay there forever. Help is on the way.
Definitely.
That's a really interesting point about tuning from the PvP side, and I often draw that because that's just my experience. You would often see sleeper specs. So specs that nobody played, but were actually really strong. Like really, like could be insane. If like the best players picked up the spec and ran it, it would be like they wouldn't lose. Like it'd be broken. But no one really knows about it for like weeks and months. And then someone figures it out and then it's abused and then it's nerfed. And it's like, dude, that was in the game for like 3 months and no one actually saw that it was there. And then once it gets abused, everyone learns about it, everyone plays it, then it gets nerfed. And it's like, how funny, like that's been like that for so long. I think there was a season where Outlaw Rogue was like that. It was like, Outlaw Rogue was like the best rogue, but everyone was playing Assassination because Assassination was also good. So then Assassination got nerfed, everyone swapped to Outlaw and because they're like they wanted to try other things, and Outlaw ended up being way better than Assassination even was in the first place. it's like oh my gosh, crap. Yeah, that's the example that comes to mind.
And definitely something that we felt. Also,
in PvE though, you have logs, right? So maybe in PvE this doesn't happen as much because you can basically iterate every spec under simulations and have every spec simmed out like perfectly, and you can just look statistically like, okay, this spec's actually just doing the best. So maybe in PvE it's a little bit more numeric.
Let's ask, since we're on the topic of rating, it's kind of like a little bit more open-ended question with some examples, but feel free to like disregard the examples. Sure. In terms of Mythic Plus has gone leaps and bounds in terms of design from the beginning of let's say end of Shadowlands to where it is now, and the fact that you guys changed the affix pool like twice.
Yeah.
In what was it, less than a month? That was incredible. So obviously you guys really care about it, and it was a lot of feedback that probably pushed it as well. And I was wondering if there's any plans on doing similar stuff for raiding with some of the, I don't really want to say outdated, but the walkbacks to the raids, the wipes that have a lot of downtime when it comes to like pushing a boss, and there's a lot of stuff that feels like it maybe made a lot of sense for older raids, but right now when we're progressing Smolder on, and it feels like we're losing more time trying to get back to the fight.
Yeah, that's something that we've talked about, definitely. I think we want to do a better job of like adding more consistency and formalizing the idea of checkpoints. As opposed to just kind of, they seem arbitrary, they're invisible, you don't know. Sometimes like in Mythic Plus, you have to ask, is it safe to release right now? Or am I going to, like, you shouldn't have to ask those questions. There should be a more consistent framework. That's not quite ready for us to roll out yet, but it's something that we're talking about and we want to do better where.
That's great. That's great.
Really crazy question.
Sure.
6-player Mythic Plus ever discussed?
I mean, it wouldn't just be Mythic Plus. The idea of 6-player groups
Content,
has been discussed at times. I mean, right, some of it is just looking at the ratio of tanks to healers to DPS and saying, you know what, like, there'd be more players that we could fit in if we did this. I think, the challenges there are, it would be a huge change to the overall feel of the content, to both existing social groups that have been running dungeons with 5 players and feel like that's how they play the game. Now suddenly you'd need to find someone else consistently to do that. But it's also like that is one of the things that's just always been what a WoW dungeon is.
I like 5. I don't see that
even
reason
little
here.
things like how much space we give you to spread out, how we lay out the dungeons. We'd have to rethink a surprising number of things, I think, to make it a really good experience. So it's not to say that the idea is completely dead, but it's something that every time we've considered it has felt a little bit too scary to make as a game-wide change. And so instead we pursue other approaches.
So the idea, I think, behind the 6 players, you add an extra DPS so that there's more DPS players to the tank and healer so you can fill groups quicker. That's the theory. Like, I know in Arena it's a problem because if you have 3 players and one of them's a healer and 2 DPS, you're always just waiting on healers, I kind of agree with Ian here, though. Like, it's always been 5. I mean, you have to really think about that one because the framework is just going to shift considerably on so many different levels if you do that. As a side thought, though, where would World of Warcraft be as a game if Mythic Plus did not exist? Like, I feel like it is such a, like, just dead, right? Like, it would, like I feel like raiding isn't a big enough cornerstone to hold the game up by itself. If Mythic Plus never got invented in Legion and it wasn't in the game, I don't know what WoW would be today. Like, it is, I feel like it is the game for so many people. You know what I mean? I feel like it is like the game. I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly traumatic, like between a raid and, Battlegrounds and achievement hunting and stuff. Like, the game would maybe still be fine, but like, dude, I guess what I'm trying to say is Mythic Plus is just such a big feature, and at one point it wasn't even in the game. And Legion, it just changed everything forever, in a really big way. Yeah.
Because it would be like, the whole rework of everything, like the dungeon layout, the mechanics, all that.
Yeah, and I think and it wouldn't be for Mythic Plus really alone. It would be like game wide, like this, changing the size of a party, changing the user interface, changing like for across the whole game. Because again, you wouldn't want a 6-player raid in Mythic Plus where you have like a 5-player party and one person separately. Like, we would need to rethink all of that, right? So it may be something that does make sense at some point, but not something we're doing right now.
Building on that question with augmentation kind of revolutionizing the role distribution or the player distribution within a party, and sometimes it feels mandatory, but maybe that's for higher end content. I'm not sure if you guys have plans to do more support style classes. People have been, talking about, priest could use one, or this class could use one. I don't know if augmentation is going to be the only one or if there's more, but if there are, or there will be plans to add more, would this affect, the 6-player Mythic Plus is one example, but would this affect the type of group distribution, like you said, the ratio of tanks, healers, and DPS within the content?
Yeah, I think so. We don't have any plans to add new support specs right now, but we're definitely open to it. And if we, look at adding a new class or adding new specializations to existing classes, I think the idea of something that's AUG style is something we would consider. I don't think that we would call it a brand new role, though. I think we still call augmentation DPS. They're treated that way for composition purposes, for queuing. And really, the inspiration there is trying to recreate a bit of the play style that existed like 18 years ago. If you think back to Burning Crusade and like Shadow Priests or Enhancement Shaman, where like you were valuable to your group. You really wanted a Shadow Priest in every raid because they were providing mana, they were debuffing the boss. Their job wasn't to top meters, but they were adding to the group's damage, and that felt valuable for certain players who other players didn't want to do that. They wanted to be the one topping meters. And so we think that there should be a place for that mentality and that type of play style in modern World of Warcraft. I think we'll see how that continues to evolve as we.
Some players like to support. Like I think of like Peekaboo and me. Like Peekaboo could be on the augmentation evoker. I could be maybe on the mage, getting the kills, doing all the damage, doing all the CC. I mean, doing pretty much everything. But Pika could be there, putting up a debuff. Right? Or kind of sitting in the back and kind of watching everything happen. And it still feels like he's doing something, but in reality, he's just kind of watching it all happen. And I think that's like, there's a certain player that's like, it's just perfect for him. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Make class decisions going forward.
Want to get a little bit into the hero talents.
Sure.
So, for the most part, I feel like hero talents were quite a success, and we've seen a lot of changes throughout the alpha and beta and message and Asma, so it's obviously being iterated on constantly. Now, there's a couple of specs that could probably use some more love, and I'm not going to name any examples here, but are you guys considering going for revamps in future patches of Dragonfly, like actual revamps for the hero talents, right?
Anything is possible. I would say that it's unlikely that we do like a complete revamp in the sense of like reimagining core aspects of an existing tree, because at that point there'll be players who've been playing with that as their identity, as their rotation for months, and if a patch drops and suddenly fundamental aspects of your class are different, that's probably too much change for a patch. That's the sort of change we would make in an expansion. It's certainly possible that in future expansions we might overhaul or change or modify the hero talent system significantly. But we're definitely going to keep tuning and iterating. I think we made a point of having as many of the hero talents as we could playable early on in beta, so that we could spend the entire beta cycle really iterating on them, responding to feedback. But of course, at some point, we have to say, okay, we're going to stop, we're going to tune, we have to ship the game. We can't keep iterating forever, but that will continue through patches, right? And I think as we start to see which hero talent trees are more popular or less popular, as we get feedback from a broader base of players using them in all the contents in the live game, that will inform future changes.
Great to hear.
One of the things that I always think about when Blizzard adds in new systems like the hero talents or just the talent trees in general is, where do you go from here? Because right now, I actually feel like there's a good amount of ability. Like the game feels pretty good from here. Like it's pretty enjoyable. But where do you go from here when you want to add some spice and midnight in the next expansion? Like, what do you do with Sun Fury? Do you just drop it down so you get more stuff? But what about the next expansion? Do you just drop it down and get more? Like, it is this continual struggle that Blizzard probably faces of like, how do you keep advancing without just like over bloating the game, and without just like, okay, we're gonna add in 2 new abilities and get rid of 2 old ones, like without it just feeling kind of net negative or net neutral, I guess, where it's just like, okay, well, I got something cool, but I also lost something cool, so like, okay, that's kind of all right. Like, that seems like a really challenging continual thing that they have to face every expansion, right? It's like, okay, more double nodes. Well, the thing is, okay, so you added more double nodes, sure, but then the next expansion comes out. Do you just add more double nodes? Then the next expansion comes out. What I'm saying is, expansions are an inevitability. And if you just keep adding a singular thing like double nodes or more abilities or more passives, that at some point you have to like the list just gets so long. You know.
Kind of addressing the hero talents as well. It's a little bit of brand question, but as people who get engaged with a lot of the specs, we're kind of grateful that the tier sets that we have in the first season are a little bit more simple because we want to explore. Yeah. And I guess that probably was the intention of keeping them a little bit more simple. So we have the freedom to explore the hero talents, and I feel like we're strapped to one particular thing. If you guys have anything planned so far or any ideas on the table with future tier sets, do you think they would prioritize a particular hero talent more, or maybe just pure talent focused and still leave the freedom for people to choose between hero talent A and hero talent B?
That's a very good question. I mean, that's something that I think I would need to discuss, that the combat team would need to discuss as they craft set bonuses. You know, sometimes we do want to nudge players in one direction or another when it comes to making a tier set. If there's a talent that's less popular, a tier set that suddenly makes that the better choice for a few months can be interesting for variety. I think that pushing players to one hero talent tree, though, definitively would feel too constricting, because that's like a very large decision, and we don't want to make it feel like, oh, if you really like these hero talents, you shouldn't play this at all for the next few months.
Well, sticking on the hero talents here, but looking a little bit further ahead. So at some point, that whole interface with hero talents is going to get filled up.
Yeah, we're just talking about this. Yeah.
What are the guys' thought process on this? And I don't want to mention borrowed power.
Yeah.
Because we all know borrowed power is also like the trinket you get. So
yes, items are the original borrowed power.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So I'm not going to go there. But at some point, that whole interface is going to get filled up. Like, what is the philosophy here? Are you guys going to go even further with them? Yeah. Or is it something that, okay, maybe at some point we will get some sort of extra mechanics similar to maybe, I don't know, Legion, you know?
Yeah, so, I mean, it's hard to say what the far-off future holds, but I think when we redid the talent system in Dragonflight, when we thought about hero talents for War Within, we were thinking about managing progression, new levels, without excessive complexity. Like, actually, I think that adding hero talents, where fundamentally you're making one big choice between this pool of things or that pool of things, is less complexity than just adding 10 points to the Dragonflight trees would have been, and all of those extra options. So I think as we look forward, we can add a few points to class respect trees, we can add a few points to hero talent trees, we can also add entirely new hero talent trees as horizontal progression to choose among. I think we're probably going to do some combination of those over the course of the World Soul Saga ahead. Now, in the far-off future, I mean, honestly, I think it's more likely than not that at some point in WoW's future, we're going to do another level squish, and we'll figure things out, but that's many years off. I think right now we want to focus on giving players exciting new things to look forward to. But we know that at some point, the numbers are going to get a bit too big. The sheer number of options will get overwhelming, and we'll have to consolidate into something that keeps the flavor and the interesting choice.
So we originally stopped at 60 in vanilla, and then you went all the way up to level 120, and then they squished back to 60, and now we're already back up to 80. So I wonder if they're going to let us get to level 100 again and then squish us back down. To be honest, it's getting really confusing. It's like, in that timeline, what level were we? 110? 90? 100? Okay. Now we're level 80, but we're stronger than we were at level 100, but we're going to get squished back down to 60, which is stronger than 80. Dude, I appreciate the squishes in the sense that it keeps things more simplistic. But when you start to look back historically, it gets really confusing of wait a minute. What's going on here? In Cataclysm, for example, we're level 85s, and Cataclassic, we're level 85. And when you log into retail, you're level 80, so you're a lower level, but clearly way stronger. Someone in the chat says level needs to be eliminated altogether. It's not going to matter in 6 years. So I had this idea a few years back where you just get rid of leveling, you keep level 60 as the cap, and you just release a new expansion, and there's new raids, new dungeons, new renown, new items, new talents, right? but you just don't like level. You kind of go to the new place and get the rep and stuff. Everyone called me an idiot and said the idea was bad because a lot of players love leveling their main character, and a lot of players love, you know, hopping in and getting the max level. And really, I'd have to agree with that. You know, I'd have to agree with that. A lot of people like to have that experience on launch day. You get to level up your main guy, right? So I don't know. Maybe eventually they'll move to a system like that, but I can definitely see that like it's just a massive con of like, I don't know, expansion comes out. That is, I mean, the expansion is going to come out in 4 hours here. I think 4 hours and 7 minutes, and you get to see that experience bar pop up on your main, and you haven't seen that in a few years. And it's like that moment is pretty exciting, you know?
And maybe makes it more focused and elegant.
A little bit of an off-brand question in terms of endgame as well, and it's only coming because we're a little bit of fans of PvP as well. Are there any plans, or is it possible that we can see PvP as a form of endgame content elevate to something similar to where Mythic Plus and rating is kind of like a pillar? I mean, it's definitely a pillar as well for a lot of people, and a lot of people still enjoy. I'm not sure if it was a good example, but at the beginning of Shadowlands, there was a big influx of people doing PvP, probably because the gear was probably better. I'm not saying that incentive.
Yes, but yes, if you put good enough rewards on something, people will do anything.
That is
that's
true.
something we've learned.
I don't know if that's what we want, ideally, because maybe that's not the best way to incentivize people to play PvP. I don't know if rewards are the issue keeping people away from PvP, or maybe it's a little bit too challenging or scary. But is there something that you guys have planned for PvP to kind of evolve like how Mythic Plus have evolved, so, you know, go to the next level?
It's something that I would hope that we'd be able to accomplish. I'm really excited about Battleground Blitz as a new rated format. You know, I think we added a new Battleground and War Within. We want to do more of that. It's maybe a controversial statement, but I think that Battlegrounds are the sphere of PvP that have the most potential for growth.
We agree.
Okay, so I think Arena is great, but Arena it's less approachable.
Yes.
Right. If you are getting into PvP for the first time, you are jumping in against people who may have been playing for years, and your experience can just be like, well, I might as well take my hands off my keyboard. I did 2 things, and then I got stunned and died. And that doesn't make you want to come back. It doesn't give you those moments of success. Whereas I think in Battlegrounds, being able to play the objective, support your teammates, you know, if you die, it's okay. You respawn, you get another chance. That is in general, I think, something that was where WoW PvP began 20 years ago.
Yep.
And I'd love to see if we can, you know, continue to deepen rewards and the, you know, systems around it to kind of regrow that scene.
One of the takes I had, well, I guess I've had for a very long time, is competitive PvP in almost every successful game is objective based. So in Counter-Strike, it's, you know, you're going for the node, right? You're trying to defuse the bomb. It's not just, you know, get the kills. It's get the kills while defusing a bomb. In League of Legends, the kills matter. But you respawn and there's bigger objectives, like going for the Nexus, right? And killing Baron or going for jungle kills, right? The kills matter in Counter-Strike because if everyone dies, then you're going to lose that round. But there's also an objective at play, where if you don't focus on the objective, you'll just lose the round anyway, even if you're up in kills. And same thing happens in League. Dota is obviously the same. I'm trying to think of more examples off the top of my head. Like a lot of competitive PvP is objective-based combat. There's almost no form of competitive PvP that's incredibly popular that is just straight up fight to the death and then see who lives. I'm trying to think of more examples. Fortnite, competitive. People in the chat, what else is there? Plunderstorm, yeah, I mean, Smite, sure. PUBG, sure. Overwatch, sure. Warzone, sure. Valorant, sure. Yeah, so like almost every single game isn't just almost every single successful competitive PvP game has an objective tied to it. It's not just kill the other side, right? I'm not saying every single one, but almost every single one. So I made this claim about 10 years ago when and the claim was like Battlegrounds have PvP with an objective tied to it, and that's beautiful. Like, that's cool. We need more people in it. It turns out 10 years later, the RPG scene is kind of dead. You know, and I personally would like to see a lot more like attention and influx given to that objective-based PvP game mode, because it's really fun and it's what every other game has found success with. And I think in WoW, when you're getting kills, but there's also like, I'm running the flag, or I'm also capturing a node, and if I die, I can come back and still try to win the game. And even if we're down in kills, we can still win by playing smart. I think that's just such a good. It gives there like a third dimension to the gameplay, right? Anyway, wrapping it back around, we have BG Blitz coming, which is like kind of cool in the sense that it's is it 8v8 or 6v6? I think it's 8v8. I actually haven't played any on the beta. Someone in the chat knows. 6v6 or 8v8? 8v8, yeah. So Blizzard has been toying with this idea for a long time. If you guys remember back in like 2015, 2016, GCD TV got hired by Blizzard, and they were testing new formats for PvP with the objective-based format in mind. And they tested a 6v6 battleground tournament, if you guys remember. And in that 6v6 tourney, what they were testing was, could objective-based style combat work with a 6v6 kind of like, so 10 people is kind of a lot of people, so it just gets very hectic and chaotic. What if we put it to 6? What if we just had 6 people? Anyway, it was a really fun tournament, right? But they never really did anything with that, and that was like 8 years ago, so maybe it was a failure, I don't know. Anyway, 8 years later, we're seeing 8v8 being implemented in the game, which is kind of a spin-off of that 6v6 tournament they had back in, well, I think it was Warlords of Draenor, potentially. Probably Warlords. So now they're putting an 8v8. We'll see how it goes. Maybe it'll blow up. Maybe the future of PvP will be bright when you introduce objectives instead of just killing, like every other successful PvP game. Yeah. It was in WoD, yeah? Yeah, Astrana, you remember. You remember Astrana, that's what we're talking about. Anyway, let's keep watching.
It's how we started with PvP as well, and it was a gateway. It was a pillar of what WoW was about, the Horvest Alliance, the dynamic and stuff. And I feel like kind of missing it a little bit, but everything that you've done, like PvP scene has been way better with the huge expansion, and it's been going through some journeys of its own.
Speaking about incentives in PvP back in Shadowlands, I want to get into a little bit of the gearing system, right? So you guys made a big improvement in Dragonflight with the crests and upgrading all of that, right? One, I would say, point of contention would have been if like a new player would come into the game, or let's say a returning player for like who hasn't played for like 4 years. Yeah, it feels that it is a bit too much. Okay, we understand because we play every day. We're very aware, right? Yeah. But it feels like, and I don't know why. Maybe you can explain. So it feels sometimes it's like overly complicated. Yeah, you know what I'm saying?
I absolutely get what you're saying. It's something that we grapple with as a team as well. Even like, I think when we were first announcing the system and trying to like write a blog to summarize it and announce it, you look at the blade, you go like, oh my God, this is so complicated. There's all these different names. But then like, I think once you actually play it, it's pretty straightforward. For most players, you're not actually seeing and dealing with all of these different things. You have a level of difficulty that you're doing. You're getting a tier of rewards, and it's like, I go to the vendor, I go to the upgrade NPC, this is what I need to upgrade my item, I get it, I upgrade the item, and simple.
I have a small critique here. I agree that once you play WoW, it makes sense. That's fine. The issue is that it changes like every other expansion, or sometimes every expansion. So you play, you learn how to do it, you got it down, and then the next expansion, they change it and iterate on it. And it's like, okay, now I'm confused again. Okay, I played and got it. And then you say you quit for 6 months, you come back, and then they change it again. And you're like, it's different again. Okay, let me learn. Okay, I got it. And then you quit for a year or two and you come back and it's different again, right? So I feel like what would help in the long run for the player base to not be confused is you pick something, you really sit down and you think about it, and you don't change it anymore. It's like, okay, this is the system we're kind of going with, right? This is the system we're kind of going with. It makes sense. People got it. Let's not change this for a very long time, because like I think that's kind of what's been more confusing than anything, right? That's what's been more confusing than anything, is that it just keeps changing every time someone comes back. The system now I actually do think is pretty good, especially I think it's been the system since Dragonflight. You get the gear, you upgrade the gear. It feels nice, right? It's very simple. But if it keeps changing to something else simple, then it gets confusing.
But I think it's a testament to, honestly, how complicated, how complex WoW's systems, WoW gearing and WoW content are. We're not setting out to build a complex system, but we need to build a system that's going to serve all players. That's going to, make everybody at every level, from outdoor world content to like high-end Mythic Plus, Mythic Raiders, feel incentivized, but also like avoid some of the more like degenerate loopholes or pitfalls where it's like, oh, I can like farm easy content and use that to level all my gear up, or like I can get the best gear in the game without ever doing the hard content. Like, so we need to have these restrictions, these tiers. That's why we can't just say there's one currency, you can upgrade any item as much as you want, because then everyone would end up at the same place at the end of the day, and there would be no reason to challenge yourself. There would be no differentiation between those tiers. We're always going to look for more ways. I think there's more we can do in terms of the user interface and how your item tooltips look to try to make it like more intuitive, what you're looking at, what the tiers are. You shouldn't have to memorize like what is veteran, what is champion, which is better, how do these fit in. But it's a new, ultimately in the history of WoW, it's a new system, right? It's so integral to the game right now, but a year and a half ago it didn't exist.
Exactly.
So we're going to keep building on it and refining it and hopefully making it more elegant.
In relation to the gear, this is kind of pointing out something that you guys did in BFA, which was really cool in the sense with the salvage system, where it felt like nothing was really ever wasted, since we repurposed the items into crafting professions and things like that. I'm not sure if this is something that you guys talked about in the future for maybe just scrap items for crests or flight or in Valor Stones in this case and things like that. Is there something like this that
I think that's an interesting idea. The reason why we didn't carry scrapping forward after BFA is that we found that it really undermines like gathering professions in a lot of ways, because so many people, it didn't matter if you weren't a miner, well, you're scrapping all this gear. It didn't matter if you weren't a skinner, you were, scrapping all this gear, and that made people feel like those professions weren't as valuable. But that said, the baseline idea that just because if you don't need an item to equip, you can turn it into something else that's valuable helps make more of our rewards feel more rewarding. Like, I think something that weirdly was one of the most successful versions of this at the very beginning of WoW was the way enchanting worked when epics were really rare. Like, to do the best enchants, you needed those void crystals from disenchanting gear, from molten core, from Blackwing Lair. You couldn't get
if you got an epic item, it's like, bro, no one needs it, great, give it to the enchanter, we'll put that in the guild bank, and then we can get the weapons enchanted from our main tank or whoever needs it, right? It felt really, 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 really good.
Epics any other way. And so there were times when, like, I know my raid group, we were almost happy to see items that no one needed, because we could disenchant them and then make an enchant for our main tank or whatever. Like, the more we can find ways to put unneeded items to another use, I think the better rewards overall will feel.
Awesome. A question related to delves. From what we've seen so far, what we've tested so far, and listened to people, and I know there's been a bunch of other interviews as well, where delves have kind of been really clarified to be a content for people who don't have the time to dedicate to like a full Mythic Plus night or to a raid, and it's easier. There's a lower barrier of entry. They're really fun. There's a lot of potential there. I'm not sure exactly how far ahead you've planned to develop them. So far, they've been really cool. We were wondering if there's any way to make it into like an evergreen system, or we were just experimenting with them in War Within?
No, I mean, I think our hope is we definitely didn't build Delve to just be a War Within system. I think our hope is that this is a long-term pillar, for players who are solo, play in small groups, alongside dungeons, raids, and PvP going forward. And that as we build new spaces, they will have delves. Of course, we're going to evolve the system. We need to hear feedback and learn from how it plays out in a real live environment where players play differently than they do in beta, right? When you're in beta, if you're doing delves, you're just doing it just to check it out versus someone who has progression goals and gear they want to get and a great vault row they want to fill up. But I think, we remain very excited about that and, want to have it as an option for people who otherwise have kind of run out of stuff to do if they're solo players and don't want to do dungeons or raids at a certain point. But also at the high end of the system, I think there are, even for people who are doing Mythic Raids or doing Mythic Plus, we have some fun solo challenges for cosmetics at the very high end of the system that I think will be interesting for those players as well.
I feel like it's always like this, right? New expansion comes out, there's new features. They want to see what sticks and what players actually really love and see what doesn't, right? You throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And it's like, okay, Torghast people hated. Let's get rid of that. Island expeditions. What was that? Was that BFA? I think. They tried that. Everyone was very optimistic and they kind of sucked and no one played them. So they got rid of it. But like, for example, if Island Expeditions all of a sudden just had like a massive player base, I'm sure they would have expanded upon it. Mythic Plus was an idea in Legion. They wanted to try it out. Super successful. Okay, let's keep that as like a cornerstone philosophy and like how we're going to develop the game moving forward. So I feel like delves are going to be the same. It's like if nobody's playing them, okay, maybe they'll kind of like keep them in the background or get rid of them altogether. If it becomes just like this massive thing like Mythic Plus, like all these solo players are like, finally I can play the game, then it's like, okay, cool, we have something that we can actually move forward with in every expansion as like a major cornerstone to our video game, right? But I feel like they're smart. They're gonna like listen and see like, are players actually doing this or not, and they're gonna cut the crap and then develop the stuff that people are enjoying, right?
Awesome. Well, Ian, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for being so open and obviously super passionate about the game and knowledgeable. So I hope now everybody knows. Thank you, man. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure chatting, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you as well.
Absolute W interview, guys. W. I'm glad we made the 30 minutes to check that out. That was Marcillion Online Ian interview at Gamescom. So just 2 days ago, guys.